Welcome to the 1000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 960th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Caliph entered the mansion, he and the man with him, they saw it be such as would make one forget family and fatherland, for it was like a piece of paradise. Within it was a flower garden full of all kinds of trees, confounding sight, and its dwelling places were furnished with costly furniture. They sat down, and the Caliph fell to gazing at the house and the household gear. Quoth Ibn Hamdun, I looked at the Caliph and saw his countenance change, and being wont to know from his face whether he was amused or angered, said to myself, I wonder what hath vexed him. Then they brought a golden basin, and we washed our hands, after which they spread a silken cloth, and set therein a table of rattan. When the covers were taken off, the dishes we saw therein meats, rare as the blooms of prime in the season of their utmost scarcity, twofold and single, and the host said, Bismillah, O my lords. By Allah, hunger pricketh me, so favour me by eating of this food, as is the fashion of the noble. Thereupon he began tearing fowls apart and laying them before us, laughing the while and repeating verses and telling stories and talking gaily with pleasant sayings, such as sorted with the entertainment. We ate and drank, then removed to another room, which confounded beholders with its beauty, and which reeked with exquisite perfumes. Here they brought us a tray of fruits, freshly gathered, and sweetmeats, the finest flavoured, whereat our joys increased and our cares ceased. But withal the Caliph, continued Ibn Hamdun, ceased not to wearing a frowning face, and smiled not at that which gladdened our souls, albeit it was his wont to love mirth and merriment, and the putting away of cares. And I knew that he was no envious wight and oppressor. So I said to myself, Would heaven I knew what is the cause of his moroseness, and why we cannot dissipate his ill humour. Presently they brought the tray of wine, which friends doth conjoin in clarified draughts and flagons of gold and crystal and silver, and the host smote with a rattan wand on the door of an inner chamber, whereupon, behold, it opened, and out came 3 damsels, high-bosomed virginity, with faces like the sun at the 4th hour of the day, one a lutist, one a harpist, and the third a dance artist. Then he set before us dried fruits and confections, and drew between us and the damsels a curtain of brocade with tassels of silk and rings of gold. The Caliph paid no heed to this at all, but said to the host, Who knew not who was in his company? Art thou noble? Said he, No, my lord. I am but a man of the sons of the merchants, and am known among the folk as Abu Al-Hassan Ali, son of Ahmad of Khorassan. Quoth the Caliph, Dost thou know me, O man? And quoth he, By Allah, O my lord, I have no knowledge of either of your honours. Then said I to him, O man, this is the commander of the faithful, Al-Mutazad Billah, grandson of Al-Mutakilwa Allah Kala. Whereupon he rose and kissed the ground before the Caliph, trembling for fear of him, and said, O Prince of true believers, I conjure thee by the virtue of thy pious forbearance, and thou have seen in me any shortcomings or lack of good manners in thy presence, do thou forgive me. Replied the Caliph, As for that which thou hast done with us of honouring and hospitality, nothing could have exceeded it. And as for that wherewith I have to reproach thee, hear, and thou tell me the truth respecting it, and it commend itself to my sense, thou shalt be safe from me. But an thou tell me not the truth, I will take thee with manifest proof, and punish thee with such punishment as never yet punished away. Quoth the man, Allah forbid that I tell thee a lie. But what is it that thou reproachest on me, O commander of the faithful? Quoth the Caliph, Since I entered thy mansion and looked upon its grandeur, I have noted the furniture and vessels therein, nay, even to thy clothes, and behold, on all of them is the name of my grandfather, Al-Mutakawil Allah Laha. Answered Abu Al-Hassan, Yes, O commander of the faithful, the Almighty protect thee. Truth is thine inner garb, and sincerity is thine outer garment, and none may speak otherwise than truly in thy presence. The Caliph bade him to be seated, and said, Tell us. So he began, Know, O Commander of the Faithful, that my father belonged to the markets of the money changers and druggists and linen drapers, and had in such a bazaar a shop and an agent and all kinds of goods. Moreover, behind the money changer's shop he had an apartment where he might be private appointing the shop for buying and selling. His wealth was beyond count, and his riches there was none amount, and he had no child other than myself. And he loved me, and was tenderly fain of me. When his last hour was at hand, he called unto me, and commanded my mother to my care, and charged me to fear Almighty Allah. Then he died. May Allah have mercy upon him, and continue the Prince of True Believers on life. And I gave myself up to the pleasure in eating and drinking, and took to myself comrades and intimates. My mother used to forbid me from this, and to blame me for it, but I would not hear a word from her till my money was all gone, when I sold my lands and houses, and naught was left to me save the mansion wherein I now dwell, and it was a goodly stead, O Commander of the Faithful. So I said to my mother, I wish to sell the house. But she said, O my son, an thou sell it, thou wilt be dishonored, and wilt have no place wherein to take shelter. Quoth I, 'Tis worth 5,000 dinars, and with 1,000 of its price I will buy me another house, and trade with the rest. Quoth she, Wilt thou sell it to me at that price? And I replied, Yes. Whereupon she went to a coffer, and opening it, took out a porcelain vessel, wherein were 5,000 dinars. When I saw this, meseemed the house was all of gold, and she said to me, O my son, think not that this is of thy father's goods. By Allah, O my son, it was of my own father's money, and I have treasured it up against a time of need. For in thy father's day I was a wealthy woman, and had no need of it. I took the money from her, O Prince of True Believers, and fell again to feasting and carousing and merrymaking with my friends, unheeding my mother's words and admonitions, till the 5,000 dinars came to an end. When I said to her, I wish to sell the house, said she, O my son, I forbade thee from selling it before, of my knowledge that thou hast need of it. So how wilt thou sell it a second time? Quoth I, Be not longsome of speech with me, for I must and I will sell it. And quoth she, Then sell it to me for 15,000 dinars, on condition that I take charge of thine affairs. So I sold her the house at that price, and gave up my affairs into her charge, whereupon she sought out the agents of my father, and gave each of them 1,000 dinars, keeping the rest in her hands, and ordering the outgo and the income. Moreover, she gave me money to trade withal, and said to me, Sit thou in thy father's shop. So I did her bidding, O Commander of the Faithful, and took up my abode in the chamber behind the shop in the market of the money changers. And my friends came and bought of me, and I sold to them, whereupon I made good cheap, and my wealth increased. When my mother saw me in this fair way, she discovered to me that which she had treasured up of jewels and precious stones and pearls and gold, and I bought back my house and lands that I had squandered, and my wealth became great as before. I abode thus for some time, and the factors of my father came to me, and I gave them stock in trade, and I built me a second chamber behind the shop. One day, as I sat there according to custom, O Prince of True Believers, there came up to me a damsel, never saw eyes a fairer than she of favor, and said, Is this the private shop of Abu Al-Hassan Ali ibn Ahmad al-Khorsani? Answered I, Yes. And she asked, Where is he? He am I, said I, and indeed my wit was dazed at the excess of her loveliness. She sat down and said to me, Bid thy page weigh me out 300 dinars. Accordingly, I bade him give her that sum, and he weighed it out to her, and she took it and went away, leaving me stupefied. Quoth my man to me, Dost thou know her? And quoth I, No, by Allah, he asked. Then why didst thou bid me to give her the money? And I answered, By Allah, I knew not what I said of my amazement at her beauty and loveliness. Then he rose and followed her without my knowledge, but presently returned weeping and with a mark of a blow on his face. I inquired of him what ailed him, and he replied, I followed the damsel to see whither she went, but when she was aware of me, she turned and dealt me this blow, and all but knocked out my eye. After this, a month passed without her coming, O Commander of the Faithful, and I abode bewildered for love of her. But at the end of this time she suddenly appeared again and saluted me, whereat I was like to fly for joy. She asked me how I did, and said to me, Haply thou saidst to thyself, What manner of trickstess is this? Who hath taken my money and made off? Answered I, By Allah, O my lady, my money and my life are all thine very own. With this she unveiled herself and sat down to rest, with the trinkets and ornaments playing over her face and bosom. Presently she said to me, Weigh me out 300 dinars. Hearkening in obedience, answered I, and I weighed out her money. She took it and went away, and I said to my servant, Follow her. So he followed her, but we returned dumbstruck, and some time passed without my seeing her. But as I was sitting one day, behold, she came up to me, and after talking a while said to me, Weigh me out 500 dinars, for I have need of them. I would have said to her, Why should I give thee my money? But my love immense hindered me from utterance. For, O Prince of the true believers, whenever I saw her, I trembled in every joint, and my color paled, and I forgot what I would have said, and I became even as saith the poet, 'Tis not but this, when a sudden I see her, mum chance I bide, nor can I word say. So I weighed out her the 500 ducats, and she took them and went away. Whereupon I arose and followed her myself, till she came to the jewel bazaar, where she stopped at a man's shop and took of him a necklace. Then she turned, and seeing me said, Pay him 500 dinars for me. When the jeweler saw me, he rose to me and made much of me, and said to her, Give her the necklace, and set down the price to me. He replied, I hear and obey. And she took it and went away. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 961st night, she pursued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Abu Al-Hassan the Khorassan thus pursued his tale. So I went to the jeweler, Give her the necklace, and set down the price to me. Then she took it and went away, but I followed her till she came to the Tigris, and boarded a boat. Thereupon I signed with my hand to the ground, as who should say, I kiss it before thee. She went off laughing, and I stood watching her till I saw her land and enter a palace, which when I considered, I knew it for the palace of the Caliph Al-Mutakawali. So I turned back, O Commander of the Faithful, with all the cares in the world fallen on my heart. For she had of me 3,000 dinars, and I said to myself, She hath taken my wealth, and ravished my wit, and peradventure I shall lose my life for her love. Then I returned home and told my mother all that had befallen me, and she said, O my son, beware how thou have to do with her after this, or thou art lost. When I went to my shop, my factor in the drug market, who was a very old man, came to me and said, O my lord, how is it that I see thee changed in case and showing marks of chagrin? Tell me, what aileth thee? So I told him all that had befallen me with her, and he said, O my son, this is indeed one of the handmaidens of the palace of the Commander of the Faithful, and happily she is the Caliph's favourite concubine. So do thou reckon the money as spent for the sake of Almighty Allah, and occupy thyself no more with her. As she come again, beware lest she have to do with thee, and tell me of this, that I may devise thee some device lest perdition betide thee. Then he fared forth and left me with flame of fire in my heart. At the end of the month, behold, she came again, and I rejoiced in her with exceeding joy. Quoth she, What aileth thee to follow me? And quoth I, Excess of passion that is in my heart urged me to this, and I wept before her. She wept for ruth of me, and said, By Allah, there is not in thy heart aught of love-longing, but in my heart is more. Yet how shall I do? By Allah, I have no resource save to thee thus once a month. Then she gave me a bill, saying, Carry this to such an one of such a trade, who is my agent, and take of him what is named therein. But I replied, I have no need of money. Be my wealth and my life thy sacrifice. Quoth she, I will right soon contrive thee a means of access to me, whatever trouble it cost me. Then she farewelled me and fared forth, whilst I repaired to the old druggist and told him what had passed. He went with me to the palace of Al-Mutawakil, which I knew for that which the damsel had entered, but the sheikh was at loss for a device. Presently he espied a tailor sitting with his prentices at work in his shop, opposite the lattice giving upon the river bank, and said to me, Yonder is one to whom thou shalt win thy wish, But first tear thy pocket, and go to him, and bid him to sew it up. When he hath done this, give him 10 dinars. I hear, and I obey, answered I, and taking with me 2 pieces of Greek brocade, went to the tailor, and bade him make of them 4 suits, 2 with long-sleeved coats, and 2 without. When he had finished cutting them out and sewing them, I gave him to his hire, much more than of wont. And he put out his hand to me with the clothes, but I said, Take them for thyself, and for those who are with thee. And I fell to sitting with him, and sitting long. I also bespoke of him other clothes, and said to him, Hang them out in front of thy shop, so the folk may see them and buy them. He did as I bade them, and whoso came forth of the Caliph's palace, and aught of the clothes pleased him, I made him a present thereof, even to the doorkeeper. One day of the days the tailor said to me, O my son, I would have them tell me the truth of thy case, for thou hast bespoken of me 100 costly suits, each worth a mint of money, and hast given the most of them to the folk. This is no merchant's fashion, for a merchant calleth an account for every dirham, and what can be the sum of thy capital that thou givest thy gifts, and what thy gain every year? Tell me the truth of thy case, that I may assist thee to thy desire. Presently adding, I conjure thee by Allah, tell me, art thou not in love? Yes, replied I. And he said, With whom? Quoth I, With one of the handmaids of the Caliph's palace. And quoth he, Allah put them to shame. How long shall they seduce the folk? Knowest thou her name? Said I, No. And he said, Describe her to me. So I described her to him, and he cried, Out on it! This is the lewdness of the Caliph, al-Mutakawwakil, and his pet concubine. But she hath a Mameluke, and do thou make friends with him. It may be he who shall become the means of thy having access to her. Now, as we were talking, behold, out walked the servant in question from the palace, as he were a moon on the 14th night, and seeing that I had before me the clothes which the tailor had made me, and they were a brocade of all colours, he began to look at them and examined them. Then he came up to me, and I rose and saluted him, and he asked, Who art thou? And I answered, I am a man of the merchants. Quoth he, Wilt thou sell these clothes? And quoth I, Yes. So he chose out 5 of them, and said to me, How much these 5? Said I, They are a present to thee from me, in earnest of friendship between me and thee. At this he rejoiced, and I went home, and fetching a suit embroidered with jewels and jacinths worth 3,000 dinars, returned therewith and gave it to him. He accepted it, and carrying me into a room within the palace, said to me, What is thy name among the merchants? Said I am a man of them. He continued, Verily, I misdoubt me of thine affair. I asked, Why so? And he answered, Because thou hast bestowed on me a costly gift, and won my heart therewith, and I make certain that thou art Abu Al-Hassan of Khorassan, the Shroff. With this I fell weeping, O Prince of the True Believers, and he said to me, Why dost thou weep? By Allah, she for whom thou weepest is yet more longingly in love with thee than thou art with her, and indeed her case with thee is notorious among all the palace women. But what wouldst thou have? Quoth I would have thee succor me in thy calamity. So he appointed me for the morrow, and I returned home. As soon as I rose next morning, I betook myself to him, and waited in his chamber till he came in and said to me, Know that yesterday night, when, after having made an end of her service by the Caliph, she returned to her apartment, and I related to her all that had passed between me and thee, and she is minded to foregather with thee. So stay with me till the end of the day. Accordingly, I stayed with him till dark, when the Mameluke brought me a shirt of gold interwoven stuff, and a suit of the Caliph's apparel, and clothing me therein incensed me, and I became like the commander of the faithful. Then he brought me to a gallery with rows of rooms on either side, and said to me, These are the lodgings of the chief of the slave girls, and when thou passest along the gallery, do thou lay at each door a bean, and 'tis the custom of the Caliph to do this every night. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 962nd night, she resumed, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Mameluke said to Abu Hassan, When thou passest along the gallery, set down at each door a bean, for 'tis the custom of the Caliph so to do, till thou come to the second passage on thy right hand, when thou wilt see a door with a marble threshold. Touch it with thy hand, and thou wilt count the doors, which are so many, and enter the one whose marks are thus and thus. There thy mistress will see thee, and take thee in with her. As for thy coming forth, verily Allah will make it easy for me, though I carry thee out in a chest. Then he left me and returned whilst I went on counting the doors, and laying at each a bean. When I had reached the middle of the gallery, I heard a great clatter, and saw the light of flambeau coming towards me. As the light drew near me, I looked at it, and behold, the Caliph himself came surrounded by the slave girls carrying waxen lights, and I heard one of the women say to another, O my sister, have we 2 Caliphs? Verily, the Caliph whose perfume and essence I smelt hath already passed by my room, and he hath laid the bean at my door, as was wont. And now I see the light of his flambeau, and here he cometh with him. Replied the others, Indeed, this is a wondrous thing, for disguise himself in the Caliph's habit none would dare. Then the light drew near me, whilst I trembled in every limb, and up came a eunuch, crying out to the concubines, and saying, Hither! Whereupon they turned aside to one of the chambers, and entered. Then they came out again, and walked on till they came to the chamber of my mistress, and I heard the Caliph say, Whose chamber is this? And they answered, This is the chamber of Sharjat al-Dur. And he said, Call her. So they called her, and she came out and kissed the feet of the Caliph, who said to her, Wilt thou drink tonight? Quoth she, But for thy presence, and the looking on thy auspicious countenance, I would not drink, for I incline not to wine this night. Then quoth the commander of the faithful to the eunuch, Bid the treasurer give her such necklace. And he commanded to enter her chamber. So the waxen lights entered before him, and he entered and followed into the apartment. At the same moment, behold, there came up a damsel, the lustre of whose face outshone that of the flambeau in her hand, and drawing near she said, Who is this? Then she laid hold of me, and carrying me into the chamber, said to me, Who art thou? I kissed the ground before her. I implore thee by Allah, O my lady, spare my blood, and have ruth on me, and command thyself unto Allah by saving my life. And I wept for fear of death. Quoth she, Doubtless thou art a robber. And quoth I, No. By Allah, I am no robber. Seest thou on me the signs of thieves? Said she, Tell me the truth of thy case, and I will put thee in safety. So I said, I am a silly lover, and an ignorant, whose passion and my folly have moved me to do as thou seest, so that I am fallen into the slough of despond. Thereat cried she, Abide here till I come back to thee. And going forth, she presently returned with some of her handmaid's clothes, wherein she clad me, and bade me follow her. I followed her till she came to her apartment, and commanded me to enter. I went in, and she led me to a couch, wherein was a mighty fine carpet, and I said, Sit down here, and no harm shall befall thee. Art thou not Abu Al-Hassan Ali the Khorasani, the Shraf? I answered, Yes. And she rejoined, Allah spare thy blood, given thou speak truth. And thou be a robber, thou art lost, more by token than thou art dressed in the Caliph's habit, and incensed with his sense. But an thou be indeed Abu Hassan, thou art safe, and no hurt shall happen to thee, for thou art the friend of Sharjat al-Dur, who is my sister, and ceaseth not to name thee, and tell us how she took of thee money, yet wast thou not chagrined, and how thou didst follow her to the river bank, and made a sign as thou wouldest kiss the earth in her honor, and her heart is yet more aflame for thee than thou art for her. But how camest thou hither? Was it by her order, or without it? She hath indeed imperilled thy life. But what seekest thou in this assignation with her? I replied, By Allah, O my lady, 'tis I who have imperilled her own life, and my aim is for gathering with her is but to look on her and hear her pretty speech. She said, Thou hast spoken well. And I added, O my lady, Allah is my witness that when I declare that my soul prompteth me to do no offence against her honor. Cried she, Is this intent? May Allah deliver thee. Indeed, compassion for thee hath gotten hold of my heart. Then she called her handmaid and said to her, Go to Sharjat al-Dur, and say to her, Thy sister saluteth thee, and biddeth thee to her. So favor her by coming to her this night, according to thy custom, for her breast is straitened. The slave girl went out, and presently returning, told her mistress that Shajar al-Durr said, May Allah bless me with thy long life, and make me thy ransom. By Allah, hast thou bidden me to other than this, I had not hesitated. But the Caliph's migraine constrained me, and thou knowest my rank with him. But the other said to her damsel, Return to her and say, Needs must thou come to my mistress upon a private matter between thee and her. So the girl went out again, and presently returned with the damsel, whose face shone like the full moon. Her sister met her and embraced her and said, Ho, Abu Al-Hassan, come forth to her and kiss her hands. Now I was in a closet within the apartment, so I walked out, O Commander of the Faithful, and when my mistress saw me, she threw herself upon me and strained me to her bosom, saying, How camest thou in the Caliph's clothes, and his ornaments, and his perfumes? Tell me what hath befallen thee. So I related to her all that had befallen me, and what I had suffered for affright, and so forth. And she said, Grievous to me is what thou hast endured for my sake, and praised be Allah, who hath caused the issue to be safety, and the fulfillment of safety is thy entering my lodge and that of my sister. I have covenanted with him that I will not be united to him unlawfully, but as he hath risked himself and incurred these perils, I will be earth for his treading, and dust to his sandals. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling of this tale for today, till it be morrow.